Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another day of Core Set 2020 previews. We're going to recap and analyze all of the cards that were previewed over the last 24 hours or so. If you're curious as to the sources of the previews, just check out the description below. All the information will be down there. Also, if you're trying to pick up any singles or a booster box of Core Set 2020, one option is FlipsideGaming.com. You can use the Heroes promo code there. Hopefully save a little cash while you also support the channel. Always appreciated, but without any further ado, let's get into it. The first series of cards we're going to look at today are all cards from the Planeswalker decks. Now, on Friday, we looked at the exclusive Planeswalkers from those decks, so we won't look at them again, but these are more cards from those products. Now, something to remember, these will not be found in booster packs, so you won't play limited with these. Although, from a power level perspective, they are all usually like pretty good limited cards if they were actually in the environment. They are technically standard legal, but they purposely designed them to be more casual. Some of them could be good not only for kitchen table, just real casual Magic, but also for some commander decks, Oathbreaker decks, and such. But let's go through and see what we have here. First few cards will come from the Ajani Inspiring Leader deck. This is Goldmane Griffin, and this is the card in that deck that's going to help you get to Ajani quicker. Part of the fun of playing with these decks is simply playing with the Planeswalker, so they always try to include a card that makes it a little bit easier to find that Planeswalker. This one, like many before it and many to come, I'm sure, will let you look for the Planeswalker not only in your deck, but also in your graveyard and put it in your hand. Savannah Sage, also from the Ajani deck. Like I said, this is the perfect example of what you can expect from these type of cards. This would be a good limited card, bear with upside, right? But again, it's not in booster packs, so it's just kind of a casual Magic card in this product. The last card from the Ajani deck that we have here is Twinblade Paladin. This could be fun in a life gain build, casually perhaps. The blue cards we're going to look at here from the Mew Yanling deck. This one's actually kind of interesting because at least it gives a +1/+1 counter as long as you control a Yanling Planeswalker. It doesn't have to be the one that comes in this product. Now, granted, there's only one other one at this time, but maybe in the future there'll be more. Again, it's nothing more than a casual card, though. The next one is Waterkin Shaman. Again, not a lot to say about this one. Yanling's Harbinger, and this is a card that will help you find Mew Yanling Celestial Wind. The black cards are from the Sorin deck. Dark Remedy is just a casual combat trick. Savage Gorger. You know, Vampire Tribal players may find some things they like in this deck. There's this card. It's nothing crazy, but it's an interesting vampire. Sorin's Guide. Here is the card that's going to let you search up Sorin Vampire Lord. Here's the card that's really intriguing, though. Again, nothing amazing for 4 mana, but it's a 3/3 Vampire Lord, and, you know, casual players are going to be looking for Lords. This is a great card for your Commander or Oathbreaker Vampire deck. I could see this particular deck maybe selling out first in stores just because a lot of folks might just want a copy of this card. The red cards are from the Chandra deck, and this one in particular will let you look for Chandra Flame's Fury. Pyroclastic Elemental. Chandra's Planeswalker deck does have an elemental theme going on. Here's another one, Wildfire Elemental. Now we'll look at the green cards that are in the Vivian Nature's Avenger deck. This is the card that will let you search her up. Ethereal Elk. Gnarlback Rhino, another card from this deck. Vivian's Crocodile. Now this is a card that actually cares about a Vivian Planeswalker, not just the one that comes in the deck. They also showed us some cards from the Spellslinger Starter Kit product, which comes out July 12th, same day as Core Set 2020. There's a white deck and a red deck included here. Again, these are very casual decks meant to help new players learn the game. Like the Planeswalker decks, these are standard legal, but you're not going to want to play Imperial Outrider or the other cards we're going to look at from these decks in standard. From the red deck, we see Engulfing Eruption and Nimble Bird Sticker. Okay, let's move on to cards that you will find in booster packs. These are your regular previews, beginning with Apostle of Purifying Light. Good sideboard card for limited. If my opponent's playing black, I'll bring it in. Or if they're interacting with the graveyard, which many times means they were probably playing black, but regardless, you'll be happy to have it in your sideboard if that's the case. Standard, could this see play? Maybe out of sideboards. If there's ever a meta where black is dominant, or maybe there's going to be a reanimation build, I was speculating on that last week. I do think that's very possible with Villas running around out there now. If that's the case, then yeah, it's good that they have this card ready as a sideboard option to keep something like that in check. Better to have the card and not need it than to not have the card if you do need it in the standard metagame. Now, what about modern sideboards? Could it see play there? I just think they have better ways to deal with the graveyard there than this card. It is a human. Maybe I would test it in a human sideboard, but I'd be pretty surprised if it worked out better than Leyline of the Void there, honestly. Kind of the same thing for singleton formats. If you're looking for something like this, wonderful, but there's just so many more powerful cards you have at your disposal. Battalion Foot Soldier. And this one is a 2/2 for 3 that lets you look for other copies of the same card in your deck. Now, we've seen a card very similar to this not too long ago, Legion Conquistador, the difference being that was a vampire, this is a human. Kind of the same story here for this card. If I'm playing Draft, it could be a good option, just try to pick up as many as possible. If I'm playing Sealed, it's going to be hard for this to be great. You don't want a 2/2 for 3. If you have 2 copies, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I probably don't consider it though till I get to at least 3 copies, which is why it's a better draft card than sealed card. Not really feeling this considering the 3 casting cost here for standard. There's just better things you could be doing. Brought Back. This is a sweet card. A lot of value here. 2 white. Instant. Choose up to 2 target permanent cards in your graveyard, permanent mind you, that were put there from the battlefield this turn. Return them to the battlefield tapped. Now you could just simply get a value play after combat. You could trade off some of your creatures, go ahead and play this. They get to go right back into the battlefield tapped. Wonderful, you're ahead. Or maybe you could do a little more with this. Just think about standard for a minute. This would interact with Lotus Field, which we saw last week. Tap a couple lands for mana, sack those lands, play the Lotus Field, get those lands back into play tapped. Next turn, you could have a big turn. Maybe you can build some kind of white ramp deck. I don't know. Also, remember the Teferis are a popular card right now, so you see a lot of people playing those. Sometimes they're destroyed, sometimes their loyalty just gets exhausted. This is a way on any given turn to bring 1 or 2 of them back if they go to the graveyard. That could even help tempo or control decks, perhaps. History of Benalia for aggro, that would be a great target for this. The list kind of goes on, so I think you have to figure out where it's going to work the best, but I do think it will see standard play. Also, any format that uses fetch lands, this is at least interesting to kind of see how it plays with those. I do think the singleton formats like Commander will really like this, though. Imagine you have like that really important enchantment that is going to help your deck go off, and it gets destroyed. Well, this is a way you get a second chance. I do like that. Or you could be in a situation where you sacrifice some permanents for value. This lets you bring them back, do it again. There's just a lot of things you could do with this card. The list goes on and on and on. In Limited, I think it's a good value card there too. Even if you don't do anything crazy with it, like I said at the beginning of this, just simply trade off a couple creatures and get them back for 2 mana. That alone could be backbreaking. Okay, this one is a reprint. It's God's Willing. Now, this is from Theros. It was also in Conspiracy Take the Crown, Masters 25 Ultimate Masters. This does see Pauper play in mono white heroic decks. That's worth noting. I do think this could see some standard play. I would just throw this in the Feather deck. I think it would be great there. In Limited, this is always a solid card. If you get a chance to play with a copy or 2 of this, you usually find something to do with it. It's just a very versatile card. Giving a creature protection from the color of your choice until end of turn might allow you to get offensive if you're only worried about a certain color when it comes to blockers. When it comes to a defensive play, you can use this on the fly to protect a creature from removal or direct damage, or just in combat as a combat trick when attackers are coming in. The Scry 1 is really nice too, considering this only costs 1. Brineborn Cutthroat, a merfolk and a pirate, interesting. Not really feeling this for standard though. Maybe if it had flying instead of flash, I might consider it. But the way it stands now, if a control deck even wants to use creatures, then there's better options out there. Even for mono blue tempo, there's better things going on. In Limited, it's fine. 2/1 for 2 with flash, yeah, that's serviceable. If I have a few instants in my deck even, and I get a +1/+1 counter on this later in the game, yeah, it could be worth it. It just depends on what else you have in your pool. It might not always make your cut, but it's definitely playable. Fairy Miscreant, this one's a reprint from Magic Origins. Basically another card that you're going to find for a Limited that is better in draft than sealed. Like, you don't want just 1 copy of this, but if you can draft 3, 4, 5 copies maybe, if I can draft a lot, I would go for it. It actually sees Pauper play. It can be that strong at times. Every once in a while, I remember when I played Magic Origins, you'll be underwhelmed just because the card itself is so fragile and the first one comes out and doesn't do anything. And if you get some bad draws and you don't hit that second one while the first one's still alive, sure, it's not going to be amazing all the time, but most of the time, if you can get the first one out, chain into the next one, draw a card, so on and so forth, your deck will really start moving. You're getting board presence. Little flyers can sometimes overwhelm. It can be a very viable draft strategy. Tail's End. All right. This is a stifle effect that staples on the fact that it can also counter a legendary spell, by the way. Wow. Okay. So it does add one more mana to the casting cost to do that, but I'm okay with that. Stifle is a surprisingly good card if you ever played with it. Like, there's so many triggered abilities, so many activated abilities that it hits, and it just does so many nice things for you that you're not even expecting. This card does that too, but can also counter a Planeswalker. Remember, all of those are legendary now. So this is kind of awesome. Let's talk Commander Oathbreaker first. I think this is just a blue staple going forward. It hoses commanders, it hoses Planeswalkers, and again, sometimes stifle effects are just really good. Standard, could it see play there? I think it could out of sideboards, again, because of Planeswalkers, but it also deals with things like Blast Zone pretty effectively. Even Modern and Legacy, I do think it might see a little sideboard play occasionally. This does answer a lot of threats. In Limited, you might not always play it. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to be a little more controlling and methodical, then yes, it's going to be a good main deck card for you. If it is in your sideboard, though, definitely side it in against an important legendary spell, or maybe just against a really good triggered ability that beats you. Yarok's Wavecrasher, good limited card here. This is nice for a couple different reasons. One, it's an elemental, so if I'm in an elemental plan, maybe playing Teamer colors, this could be good. Also, Sultai cares about things entering the battlefield. You have some good enters the battlefield effects there. So this card does let you bounce something back to your hand, play it again, maybe repeat that enters the battlefield effect. That's kind of nice in some builds. Still, even if that is a drawback, and sometimes it might feel like a drawback, you're still getting a 4/4 for 4. Like, that's not the worst thing in the world by far, especially in blue. Blue doesn't typically have things with those type of stats that are coming into play. So you have to kind of expect that you're going to have to do something to get it into play. And again, bouncing a creature doesn't always have to be a drawback. Also notice it says return another creature you control, so you can actually play this if you have no creatures on the battlefield and you won't have to return this one. So that's kind of nice too. Overall, a little too expensive for standard, but nice uncommon for limited. Embodiment of Agonies. This is a really bizarre rare, but I like it. I've never seen this ability before. First off, it has Flying and Death Touch, so nothing wrong with that. Enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each different mana cost among non-land cards in your graveyard. For example, black and 2 and 2 black and 1 are different mana costs. So any amount of variance in these costs, so that could be the colors, it could be the converted mana costs, so on and so forth. Yeah, that's kind of crazy, even if you just had a little variety in your graveyard. It's not Tarmogoyf, obviously, because it doesn't work on lands, and obviously once it's out, it can't grow anymore. It just gets the +1/+1 counters based on the time when it enters the battlefield, but still, I think this could be a good card. Let's talk standard first. Maybe there's some kind of multicolor deck, because I do think the more colors, the better this is going to be. But maybe that deck is based in Golgari, and you could have a lot of ways to fill your graveyard, and then you come along and play this, and you could have a large flyer relatively quickly. Worth testing. I think it's worth trying out. Also, you do find spells out there that let you reanimate small creatures, so with this only costing 3, if it does get milled into your graveyard, you might have opportunity to just go ahead and bring it back later through those means. Yeah, that could actually help with the consistency. Now, in limited, yeah, same story here. Even if this thing came in as like a 2/2 Flying Death Touch creature for 3, like, you got your value there in limited, that could be good enough. And the odds are in that format, most of the time it is going to come in as a bigger creature, and that could be hard to deal with. Singleton formats like Commander, sure, of course, a demon deck. Maybe you're playing with Liliana's Contract. This is a cheap demon. Even if it came in small, it could go towards that contract requirement. And again, you're going to have a lot of variety in your casting costs in a format like that anyway, so many times it could be larger. Really cool card. I love the design here. Gorging Vulture. This is interesting. It does populate your graveyard, lets you gain a little life too if you hit creatures. It costs 3 for a 2/2 flyer though. Economy doesn't feel amazing for standard because there are a lot of ways to populate your graveyard there. But if I'm looking for a way that's also going to give me some board presence in the air, I don't know. There's a deck that might at least consider it. Outside of that though, this will be a great limited card. Look at it this way. Even if you don't care about what's in your graveyard at all, you mill yourself a little bit and you got a Windrake for 3 in black. Nothing wrong with that. You'll play it and be pretty happy. If you have any kind of way to reanimate, or not even reanimate, just pull cards back from your graveyard to hand at some point in the game, then this will be wonderful because it could give you more options when you go to play that spell. This is a common, so I would even consider this for some pauper builds. Undead Servant. Okay, this is also from Magic Origins. Again, I'm talking draft and not sealed here. I want at least 3 copies probably in a deck, and Even then, I want enough ways to move through my deck relatively quickly. If not, I want 4 copies probably. This one wants to end up in the graveyard, and yes, when I play the first one, it feels bad because I'm really going behind the economy where I should be for 4 mana. But just attack with this thing. My opponent either has to take the damage or they have to block it and kill it. Maybe it even trades, and then it sets you up for the next one nicely. When that second one shows up, yeah, you know what? 5/4 power toughness for 4, that's starting to feel a lot better. Rinse, wash, and repeat, you can get super aggro with this, and then the next one could get even better again. Yeah, this one can be a good draft card for you at times. Drakusith, Maw of Flames. Okay, this is a rare dragon. It's legendary. It's a big one, 7/7 flyer. Little expensive though, 3 red and 4 to cast. Now, when this attacks, you get to deal 4 damage to any target and 3 damage to each of up to 2 other targets. So this can really spread across damage, not to mention the 7/7 flying that's also heading towards your opponent. Now, does this see standard play? With that casting cost, it's going to be tough. But if there's a way to do it, it probably involves Ilharg the Razeborer, so I'm not going to count this card out. Limited 7 is very castable. It is 3 on color though, so you have to make sure that your deck is comfortable with that 3 red. If it is, go for it. It will be very good if you can get it on the battlefield. Commander, Oathbreaker players, if you're looking for another dragon for your tribal build, this is a good one. Glinthorn Buccaneer. This is a rare. You're not going to see it all the time in limited, obviously, much like the dragon we just saw, but if you do get a chance to play with it, it could be quite good. 2/4, haste for 3. So it's going to kind of feel like a 2-drop. That's really ahead of curve when it comes to the stats just generally. Now, whenever you discard a card, it will deal 1 damage to each opponent. But it has the ability for a red and 1. You can discard a card and draw a card. Now, you can only do that, though, when it is attacking. So you do have to get aggressive with this to get the rummage to happen. But rummaging is always good. And with a 4 toughness, maybe you can pull that off a couple times over the course of the game. If you can do that, that's all added value on top of this card's good economy. In Draft and Sealed too, this might actually work well with a card we're going to see a little bit later. Can this see standard play? I think it's a little too dependent on board state to be great there. The problem is, for it to be good, you have to attack with it, or you have to have ways to discard cards, which you don't want to just willy-nilly discard cards, so you probably want to be looting or rummaging, which means you'll need other cards to do that while this is in play. Just feels like you're trying to put too many pieces together for me. Now, there's more cards to see in the set. Maybe something would help with the consistency, but at least right now, I'm not really feeling it. Commander? Yeah, you know what? Wheel decks might enjoy this. Or if you're looking for a Minotaur/Pirate, here you go. Pax Mastiff. Okay, here's another card that wants you to play multiples, but this one's a little bit different. This is a brand new card. And what I like about this is I could just play 1 copy of this and feel pretty good, so it works better in sealed. 2/2 for 2, hey, it's a bear with upside. I have a mana sink there that pumps its power, and yeah, sure, it's better if I have more copies of the card, but if I only have the 1, it's still there, and I only paid 2 for this to begin with, so why not, right? Now, if I do draft and I can draft a bunch of copies of this, sure, it gets better, especially in an aggressive build, but at least it doesn't feel like a dead card in my sealed pool. This is pretty good design for that reason. Not really feeling this one for standard. I don't think it's doing enough there, but still, good limited card. Scampering Scorcher. Okay, so for 4 mana, you're getting 3/3 power and toughness in the form of this card and 2 elemental creature tokens that are each 1/1. They also all have haste. On top of that, any other elementals you can get on the battlefield this turn also will have haste. Okay, so that's not bad for 4 mana. A lot happening, even if you don't get any other elementals on the battlefield. 3/3 power toughness with haste is actually pretty good. Now, granted, spread across 3 different cards means they're each going to be a little more fragile than if it was a 3/3 haste creature. You got to remember that. But they are elementals as well, so they will play into some of these other elemental strategies in limited. So if you're in those teamer colors, I'm sure you're going to find things to do with it. As a matter of fact, I have a card in a few minutes we're going to look at that is going to combo very, very well with this. Standard, this card on its own isn't amazing, but with the combo I'm going to talk about, it at least has a chance. So more on that in a little bit. And again, if you're trying to build any kind of elemental commander deck or something like that, this will be great there too. Thunderkin Awakener. Okay, this is the card I was referring to. Now, this is a 1/2 haste creature. It's an elemental too, which could be relevant for Teamer Elemental Unlimited. Cost 2. When it attacks, you're able to take an elemental creature card from your graveyard if it has toughness less than this card, and you can put it directly into play. Attacking, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So this is a 1/2, which means that if you don't pump it, then you're looking at things that have less than 2 toughness. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? We just saw a card a few moments ago, which would be great with this. If you targeted Scampering Scorcher with this, then everything would have haste that entered the battlefield that turn. You would get the 2 tokens. The Scorcher at least would have to attack, but that's okay. At the end of the turn, it's going to die anyway. Then maybe you could do it again next turn, as long as this can survive, of course. Also, there could be ways to pump this so that you can hit other things. Another card that would work great with this, which we saw last week, was Risen Reef. Whenever Risen Reef or another elemental enters the battlefield, under your control, you get to look at the top card of your deck. If it happens to be a land, it goes into play tapped. If it's not a land, it goes to your hand. Basically card draw every time an elemental enters the battlefield. Think about this card, Risen Reef and Scampering Scorcher together. If you're lucky to get those cards unlimited, maybe more so in draft, then you could have a very good deck on your hands. I also think that that type of combo has potential for standard. I've been saying all week, maybe an elemental deck can get there. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Well, now that we have this card and the previous card, I do think that deck has a better chance than ever. Maybe throw in Tormenting Voice or Honor the God Pharaoh to populate the graveyard in addition to the elementals. Also things like Multani Yavamaya's Avatar. That could be interesting because technically it is a 0 toughness creature in the graveyard. Maybe that's the beginning of a build to consider. If not in standard, maybe that's something you could do in commander. We'll have to kind of put it together, try it out, test it, see if it's consistent enough. But I do think it has some potential, just something to keep an eye on if nothing else. Outside of that, yeah, if you want to play casual elementals, this will be fantastic. It will be a linchpin card. And of course, you can just throw this in your elemental commander deck if you're trying to build one with some of the cards from this set. Where this might be most interesting to me, though, believe it or not, is Modern, because you have that whole family of ball lightning style spells. Most recently, Modern Horizons gave us Lightning Elemental. Vesper Lark is also a card from that set, which could play with this. Then you have things like Ball Lightning, Groundbreaker, Spark Trooper, Hellspark Elemental, so on and so forth. Maybe sprinkle in Rally the Ancestors. You'd have to test it out, see how consistent it would be, but it's at least worth considering. Forced Claw. This is a reprint from Avacyn Restored. On its own, not an exciting card, even in limited. A 7/7 for 6 with no trample. It's okay if you're desperate. You really want a bigger bomb with some kind of ability if you're going to pay 6 for it. Now, with that being said, this is an elemental. This time around, that matters. So there could be a teamer deck that's a little more likely to play this than normal because of the creature type here. But a lot of the times, it might not make your cut. This one is a German language preview, Lightning Stormkin, a little reminiscent of Sky Knight Legionnaire, which can be a pretty good limited card in the right environment. But this time, instead of Boros colors in one, you only have to pay the Izzet colors. Kind of interesting. It's also an elemental wizard, which is important. Think about limited first with this one. 2 casting cost, 2/2 flying haste, nothing wrong with that. It is 2 different colors, sure. Maybe it's not always a turn 2 play. Maybe sometimes it's like a turn 3 or turn 4. But it could still be good at that juncture in the game. Secondly, it's an elemental, so again, teamer elementals might be happy to see this card. Aside from that, what about standard? You know, it is a wizard. Might be a long shot, but if an Izzet wizard deck could get there in this upcoming season, then yeah, this could be a part of it. Cheap way to turn on Wizard's Lightning and Wizard's Retort, and it's a quick creature in the air. This one's a Spanish language preview, Sky Knight Vanguard. Very aggressive limited card here. I'd be happy to play this one in an aggro build. Like, this is a 1/2, so it's not huge, but it only costs you 2 different colors though. But then when it attacks, it creates a 1/1 white soldier creature token tapped and attacking. So if I'm lucky and get this down on turn 2, maybe even turn 3, the skies are clear, I attack in, I start making these tokens attacking as well. Now granted, my opponent might be able to dispatch those easily, but if they stumble at all, they could be in trouble. Could be good with some light removal early on in the game. Could this see standard play? I think it's got a chance in an aggressive build. There is competition for it though. I realize these cards are a little different, but things like Legion Warboss, Krenko Tin Street Kingpin, those are very good cards. Maybe you play this in conjunction with those in some kind of deck, but it is very possible that those could squeeze this card out as well. Ancestral Blade, I think this is a little too slow for like standard white aggro, but I'd be happy to play this in limited because it's going to feel like a bear with upside. It's a 2 casting cost 1/1, but the equipped creature has +1/+1. So there you go. Great curve filler. And later on, you might even find some utility by moving this equipment somewhere else. Nothing wrong with that. I actually think this is one of those sealed or draft cards that will overperform consistently. Bag of Holding. This is kind of a sweet rare. It only costs 1 to cast, and if you pay 2, you get to loot. But it does a little more than that. Whenever you discard a card, though, you do have to exile it from your graveyard. But if you pay 4 and tap and sacrifice this, all the cards that you exiled with this card get to go back to your hand. So you can kind of bank them a little bit. Now, sure, if this card gets destroyed, you kind of get blown out. But if you've been looting the whole time, who cares? You still got value out of it. Also, if you have other discard effects, or if your opponent makes you discard, you can get your cards back with this. By the way, this happens to be a Dungeons & Dragons item, which is kind of unique to see on a Magic card. We did have the sword before, but of course that was a promo, and then in the unset, this is the first time we're seeing a card like this in a black bordered set. Let's talk about limited first. Yeah, I would play this and be very happy with it. It's a rare, you won't always get a crack at it, but when you do, go ahead and loot away cards that are maybe the higher casting cost cards, maybe even one of your big bombs. Later on, hopefully you'll get a chance to just take it back when you do have the resources. That's awesome. It takes all the risk out of looting. Not that there's a lot of risk. I mean, the more cards you see, the better. So looting is never a bad thing. Standard, I mean, it's a cheap way to loot. I'll give it that. I mean, more often than not in Standard, this could get blown up because especially after game 1, people could board in some hate for it. So I don't know how consistent it will be. Maybe I would test it, though. There's a chance that it could make it into a build here or there. More likely, I could just see myself sideboarding this in against the deck running Duress and Thought Erasure to try to recoup my losses mid-game. Singleton Commander, Oathbreaker, I do think it could be good in those formats, too. It's just a simple card that you can put into any deck because it is colorless that brings added value, especially if you have bonuses for either discarding or drawing. Remember, though, the cards you discard with this won't go to the graveyard. They will be exiled. And don't get too greedy with this. You don't want it to get blown up before you get the cards back if you can help it. But still, maybe you could throw this in like a Kjell Chosen of Crewfix deck or something like that for some value. Colossus Hammer. Okay, this isn't just fun top-down design in a core set. That's part of it. But this is actually a good card. Really cheap equipment. I always want to pay attention to that. Now, the equip cost is expensive, 8. But giving something +10/+10, even if it loses flying, yeah, that could be very, very important, especially if it does have some kind of other evasion or trample. So what do I do with this thing? Standard, I don't know if the pieces are there right now. I think that maybe in the future we could get more things that play well with this that could help equipment along, but at least right now we're not there. You could ramp into this, but you could also just ramp into a big old creature with trample, and that might be better because you don't have to worry about the two separate parts in that case. Now where this gets interesting though is Modern. Think about this. Turn 1 Glistener Elf, turn 2 Sigarda's Aid, and this? Yeah, that could just be game potentially, so I do think some people are going to try this in the Infect deck. The other place to consider this is in the Cheerios deck, because you have other options there too, like Pure Steel Paladin, Core Outfitter, those are very economical options. So I do think this could see Modern play, believe it or not. Maybe even Legacy, who knows. Now, outside of those formats in Commander or the Singleton formats in general, yeah, I do think this will be good with other cards too, not only the ones I mentioned that are a little more competitive. Then there's other options like Brass Squire, Armory Automaton, Volshock Battlemaster. Those are a little more expensive than the ones I mentioned in Modern, but they still get the job done. Limited, yeah, it's not out of the question just to play this and get there. Even if you don't have any tricks, 8 mana is not too much to ask, especially with a little ramp behind it. Could be good for you there too. This is a Spanish language preview card, but it is a reprint, so on the left side you see the Modern Masters 2017 copy of Grafdigger's Cage. Now this was originally from Dark Ascension. Those copies will run you about $7 or $8, so there is some value attached to the card. Foils around $31. The Modern Masters 2017 copy around $8 and foils around $22. This sees Modern and Vintage play, very popular sideboard tech. So, what about Standard? Will it be a good option? Sure, it's going to hit a lot of things. Bolas' Citadel, Experimental Frenzy, Command the Dreadhorde, kind of. It will take care of creatures but not planeswalkers. Arclight Phoenix, and anything new that comes along, whether it's coming from this set or a future set while this is in Standard. This will see plenty of sideboard play during its time, I have no doubt. Most of the time in Limited, you won't be excited to see this as your rare. Occasionally, though, you might be happy you have this in your sideboard. Remember to bring it in if you need it. Mystic Forge, kind of reminiscent of Experimental Frenzy in some ways. Different card, though. First off, you may cast the top card of your library if it's an artifact card or a colorless non-land card. So you can't play the land off the top like you can with Experimental Frenzy, but I can tap Pay a Life and exile the top card of my deck, so that way I'm able to move past the land perhaps. So yeah, it does behave very differently. It's a little more narrow, of course, because it is artifact or colorless, but in some ways it opens up more avenues because of that tap ability. With this, you can still play cards out of your hand too. Now here's what's interesting to me, some modern affinity decks actually do play Experimental Frenzy. This is easier to cast. Maybe they try this out there. Like I said, it is going to play a little differently. I might want to test it first, but I do think it could be good there. Another place to consider this is Tron. Won't be too hard to cast there. And also you're going to run into a lot of colorless spells on the top of your deck. It could just be value. Another type of deck where I'd at least think about it is these colorless Eldrazi decks that have been coming out in Modern, even Legacy, just because Karn the Great Creator has pushed so many of these colorless decks to the forefront. Could show up in a few different places maybe. Again, is it consistent enough? Maybe, maybe not, but I'd like to try it out and see. Standard, I don't think we have a colorless or artifact deck right now, at least not one that's really focused on true artifacts and not tokens. So maybe this is a call forward to something that's coming in the future. Commander? Yeah, sure, there's a lot of colorless decks that have been popular there for a while now. This will fit into those. In Limited, I don't know if there are enough good artifacts or colorless non-lands to take full advantage of this. Although we haven't seen the whole set yet, and maybe in a draft you might be able to pull it off. Remember though, this might be good just for the tap ability. In Draft or Sealed, this could let you get past dead draws like extra lands, and that could be more than good enough. Alright, so those are the previews for today. Tomorrow, we're going to do another preview video. We're going to go ahead and look at everything that comes out over the next 24 hours. But that is going to be the last one because they're going to show us the rest of the set tomorrow. Until then, though, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon and have a great day.